I'm Andrea, one of the hosts of the Voice of San Diego podcast. Every week, I get together with the other editors at Voice and explain the news that matters in San Diego. Elections, politics, law enforcement, big investigations, and some fun stuff. The Great Palm Tree Debate, ranked choice voting, bike lane mania. It's great journalism and a lot of fun. Every Friday, wherever you listen to podcasts. Again, that's Voice of San Diego.
Awesome.
Skills Pay Bills number 12.
Yeah.
Here we go. And then today we're super honored to have with us Beryl Forman.
Yeah.
Super honored to be here too.
Yeah. We're excited
and represent.
Skills Pay Bills. Hell yeah.
And she brought bread.
Yes, we've been breaking bread.
Yeah.
Delicious olive bread. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, this is the perfect thing to do. Like you sit down with someone and then you're like, "Ooh, we could munch." And then, let them talk. You're eating, and then so it's awesome. I've gotten it like a few times, and I love it with like the feta cheese. Oh God!
And you have such an awesome, interesting life, Beryl. So where do we start? Because we have an hour. So how do we cover everything? Where's the best place to start? At the beginning?
You sent me a pretty good outline, so I know you would.
Where did you grow up, though?
I grew up in New Jersey, right over the George Washington Bridge.
Is that different than San Diego?
I would say. One of my mottos is that I'll never go back to Jersey.
Right.
No, but I grew up in a tight-knit community. It was actually a square mile. So we got to walk to every school. So it definitely was a good foundation for, things I admire about community as well. My family, my mom and my dad's side, my grandparents, we all lived within like 45 minutes of each other. So I had a great family upbringing as well. And living next to New York City is not too shabby.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I guess right after college, I kind of knew that I did not want to start my career in New York City, and was kind of looking for, a different, place to make good things happen.
Yeah. So you ended up in Hawaii.
That was a short stint, basically.
Yeah.
Right out of college, I saw something about an internship in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Who says no to that,
Yeah. And you're definitely like a trendsetter with this Hawaiian trip.
I do like to say that, living aloha.
Yeah.
It's definitely been a foundation of my upbringing. But, if you wanted to hear that story, I was there interning in Volcano National Park.
Yeah.
On the Big Island. And it was more like, I was just really settled there. I had a little bunkhouse with free meals and stuff like that. And it was really like who I met helped determine maybe if I was going to do something on the weekends. But I could also get on a bike and just explore. And, of course, I was in a national park, so that was cool. But ultimately, my big takeaway from living in Hawaii was, I guess it was in 2004, that I did discover Crocs.
That's
Those
awesome.
funky, light shoes. And they treated me very well. I happen to have a weak ankle, so that also resonated with me. But it's a perfect place to really explore with Crocs. Rocky beaches, waterfalls. So I absolutely loved them. And then when I returned to New Jersey, I really actually fell into a bit of a panic. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. But in any case, some sort of glimpse did make me realize that nobody knew what these Crocs were, and there was something unique about that. So I actually started selling them in New York.
That's awesome.
Then got picked up as a Southern California sales rep, and that's what brought me out to San Diego.
That's so awesome.
And who was wearing them in Hawaii? Like, was it big there, or was it just starting, or what?
It really was. It's a company out of Colorado, and I think they first introduced them to Hawaii, maybe some places in the Caribbean and Florida. Like, I think they were going for the ocean boat community, if you will. Yeah, and actually, I purchased them at a farmer's market. And when I decided to call the company from my parents' home in New Jersey, they're like, well, no, we only sell them to retail shops. And I was like, really? Because I bought them at a farmer's market. And they're like, all right, you sound like you know what you're talking about. We'll give you a shot. So they probably probably weren't allowed to sell it to me, but I did get like this enormous box, and I just like took them to a farmer's market, and it worked. It was funny.
Did they think it was going to work initially in New Jersey, or did they look at you kind of like, this is a long shot?
No, I think they had big hopes that their Crocs were going to go everywhere, you know?
Yeah.
And that I said something about not wanting to sell them in New York.
Was there any
like
resistance in the beginning with people with Crocs of asking like, what was it, or like what, like?
No, I really like it. Showed me that I have a knack for sales. I'll just say that much.
Yeah,
it was pretty funny because I wasn't taking it too seriously, you know. And I'm in a very comfortable environment, outdoors in a farmer's market, and I would just like almost shock people by throwing them on the floor so that they would have to pick them up and like touch them and feel how light they are.
That is so cool.
So actually, it was like almost a blowout, I would say. So that's why, because I was doing so well with it, just a few times that I sold them, that I like visited the company. At the convention center in New York when they were visiting, oh, come check us out, you know, and almost kind of like did the same thing. And they're like, you have a hand for this, you know, do you want to be? And it was kind of like, I don't know, a big position for such a young person.
Yeah.
And also I was doing well with it. So it's just like, all right, this will lead me out here, you know. It didn't last too long, but it is what brought me out to California.
That's really cool. And look, now everyone's freaking wearing them. Seriously. And I remember like when I was pregnant and, you know, my freaking ankles were like this gigantic, and I was like, I just want to wear something comfortable. No shoes fit me anymore, and I ended up going to get like these freaking Pepto-Bismol pink freaking Crocs. And I remember my family like made fun of me so much, and they were like, why are you, this is 2011, so it was
like even when you're pregnant, you know?
Yeah, and you're like, my Crocs match my ankles, they're gigantic, you know?
So you were in LA at the time?
No, I was already down here, but
okay.
I was like wearing these things, and everyone was like, what the fuck are you wearing? And I was like, they're really comfortable, and like everyone made fun of me. And
I did too.
You made fun of me. And
admittedly.
I'm like,
I kind of am late to the party usually, so
yeah.
You guys were definitely ahead of the trend.
Yeah. Well, Beryl was.
Beryl.
She definitely
Way ahead.
was way ahead.
Way ahead.
But that's so cool because it's like now everyone's wearing it, and like there's like so many different cool like little like colors, and like now they have them in tie-dye. Like my daughter has tie-dye and she has camo, and you know they have the little charms and stuff, and I feel like it is like one of those shoes where it's like you could really put personality behind it. You know, so it's like I feel like that's where people kind of like gravitate to them, and they're super freaking comfortable. So yeah.
They moved you out to San Diego, Crocs?
Financially, support did not come through. No, it was more like me trying out. But no, they actually moved to LA because it was like center of, not really, but I had to cover Southern California. So initially, I moved to LA. I was in Hermosa Beach. And I was driving up and down, like visiting a lot of the beach communities. And then my house sold within like 3 or 4 months that I was renting. So I was like, all right. And I had been hearing good things about San Diego. I hadn't even visited it yet. This is part of my territory. So I came down here with a little bit more notion of where I wanted to live. You know, I kind of got the sense that the beach communities are just overpopulated, you know, with young kids. And I don't know, the downtown scene's a little too much of a party.
Yeah.
So I felt like I chose more wisely in moving here, more so maybe that I didn't get burned out in the long term. And I remember like looking at Craigslist and see someone emphasize, oh, Golden Hill, you got to live in Golden Hill. And I probably looked at a map and saw it was right next to downtown in Balboa Park.
Yeah.
And so I've been here for 17 years now.
Wow, that's
In Golden Hill.
awesome.
In Golden Hill?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, super cool.
Yeah. Golden Hill is a very, very beautiful place to live. You know, like I feel like that place is like there's a lot of family, but then there's also all those little like kind of shops and stuff like that, and it's close enough to like downtown, it's close enough to the park, it's very central. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Has it
Beautiful
made-
place to stroll, historic.
Yeah.
Has there been any changes in Golden Hill since you moved there?
I used to say that I live equidistant to 2 great coffee shops, and now I live equidistant to 3.
There you go. Okay.
No, actually, in general, because my background with the business association, I like that it's not such a scene, you know, and that I'm going home to a quieter community. But that, yeah, actually, even with the limitation of a handful of businesses, that it seems like everybody's always done well, and I joke that Golden Hill is a golden opportunity.
Yeah.
But also the larger scheme of things of it being part of South Park and next to Barrio Logan, you know, I feel like we're all one.
Yeah.
And how long after you moved to San Diego did it take for you to kind of get involved with improving businesses and just kind of get more involved with improving just the city around you? Because
The urban planning, yeah.
How did that?
How did that occur? As I said, the Crocs thing didn't last too long. Actually, within the first month, January of 2005, that I moved here, I went to their convention. Signed up Bloomingdale's, I gotta mention it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Walked out of the convention center, and my boss called me, and he's like, "You've been terminated."
After the Bloomingdale?
Yes, after the whole convention, exactly. So it was kind of a joke. I think they just wanted to get me hyping it up, and then I don't know, probably need sales reps. So in any case, I sort of fell flat on my feet again, having just moved into a new apartment, a new city, stuff like that. And but this time I felt that. At least I've already sort of seen where I have talents and skills, and but also I wasn't going to start just selling another product. I didn't really see sales in my future, and I was particularly intrigued by living in Golden Hill and seeing so much downtown redevelopment. Like, it didn't occur to me that cities rebuild themselves. I'm like, what is that? You know. So I guess it just had me thinking about urban planning. I do have a family member who's an urban planner, so I'm somewhat familiar with the career. And I thought, going back to school and just dabbling in this new subject would be good for me. So I did start attending the urban planning. I got an urban planning certificate from UCSD. Nice. And at the time, I just started volunteering with the Golden Hill nonprofit at the time. And, I liked it. I like the subject. I was actually doing research. I kind of joked about the cafes, but it did turn me on to, it was the first time I used cafes for the internet and job searching and also being in a new community, meeting people there and, bonding with the baristas and blah, blah, blah. That was new to me. So I did actually take up research on how Wi-Fi supports community building. Anyway, some woman who was working for the CDC at the time when I did apply for the El Cajon Boulevard Business Association, she recommended me, and that was that. That was my start.
Wow, that's awesome. Because you've been a huge part of that whole El Cajon Boulevard movement, right?
I was there for 15 years. I just parted ways last July.
Wow, that's
but yeah,
awesome.
it was kind of as opposed to this, interest that sparked in looking at downtown and redevelopment, which all in all has not really been that worthy. I was happy that I did end up moving over to, a historic community that's diverse, where there is a greater need, where there was a lot to learn about small business and, other groups that we partnered with. So that's definitely what rooted me there for a very long time, is that it is just, many layers of interest.
And what year was it exactly when you started with El Cajon, the El Cajon bid there?
It was 15 years. Wow. Was it 2006? I think.
2007.
Wow. Yeah.
And what was it like then? Because that's even before we moved to San Diego. So what was it?
El Cajon Boulevard?
El Cajon Boulevard.
Well, I remember my president at the time said the Lafayette Hotel, that's the gem of El Cajon Boulevard, you know? So, of course, they're pointing out the good things, right? And I felt like that was actually my role, is to be a positive voice of the community. Also, at the time, I was immediately plugged into El Cajon Boulevard being part of the designation of all of California Historic Highway 80. So El Cajon Boulevard is actually the last leg, I like sharing this, of Highway 80, which is the first transcontinental highway from Georgia all the way to San Diego.
No way.
Wow.
So I took a lot of pride in that history, and I'm realizing I'm learning more about El Cajon Boulevard than I am about my hometown, you know?
Yeah.
And I guess that's what you do when you have a job supporting community.
Yeah.
And yes, there was the obvious, that prostitution was very present there, and the negative perception. So I guess just being young and innocent, I just really went about it as best I could. And yeah, took it for what it was in terms of it was a business association. I'm going to honor the small businesses. And another thing I was asked to do, I didn't really have much of a scope of work, I'll just say that much. So that's another thing that's really allowed me to be there for a long time, is that they honored my ideas and let me flourish in my own directions. But one very simple task was that I should interview the businesses and write articles about them. And so even unknowingly, I became a community organizer, interviewing people, finding their stories, and then over time, just sort of linking people's interests into scoping what would be an event that would work, or what would be some overall promotion, and really, what are some long-term goals. So just those one-on-ones.
Was that pre-social media too? when you were writing these articles, or was it right around the time that was happening?
It was funny. I remember I was like, well, should we start posting it on MySpace? And they're like, we cannot do MySpace. Then Facebook came along. Okay, you can do Facebook.
Yeah, right.
Like, okay, what's the difference? But there was, it's funny to think about what those differences were. As well, the Yelp. I remember I was putting all my articles that I wrote about the businesses on Yelp and giving them 5 stars. And it was getting a lot of reception from people because I wrote in-depth articles, But then at some point Yelp was like, you're giving 5 stars to everybody. You must be doing something wrong. And I was like, Cajon Boulevard's a 5-star establishment. Exactly. What do you want me to do about that? So I got kicked off of Yelp.
All right, yeah.
Oh.
Good.
So yeah, we had embraced what was available.
Cool.
At some point, I just couldn't go too deep, and really, one of my separations or things that distaste of the Boulevard is that I didn't start as a marketing coordinator, but I really got in there because of my interest in urban planning, and they opened that door, and I was sitting on committee meetings and driving conversation about mobility and such like that, but it was still always so heavy on the marketing, and I really wanted to let go of that, and things navigated, but there was just like the events built up and and it's kind of not what I signed up for. I really wanted to pursue urban planning.
But the marketing, I guess, maybe helped gain trust with the businesses and stuff like that, or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I mean, marketing first. Marketing is easy. That's where actually I coined the word place shaking. That you highlight the positive things. You post events. You draw attention, because for so long nothing had been said about the Boulevard except for that, the prostitution, this and that. That. All right, so we got to flip things up.
Yeah. Dude, that's freaking awesome. I really I know that there was like that article that basically talked about like you in the urban planning, how you got involved with all that kind of stuff. And there was 2 other people that you were working with. I'm totally spacing out with about their names. But the cool thing about it was that you were like, we're not like holding like these titles. We're just getting things done. And because I know that you were like, oh, this is my title and this is their title and this is whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, you were like, we're not even like putting that, we're just trying to get things done, and I feel like that, how did that go about? Was that easier for you to just be like, let's just get some stuff done? Because I know like when there's a lot of stuff happening, it's like, it's really difficult to like start moving forward and doing all that. Was it easier for you to just be like, let's just move and get shit done, as opposed to like, let's sit here and that's your role, like,
yeah, that's where, I said they gave me so little to do in the beginning, so that I had to start developing activities.
Yeah.
And I remember somebody said, like, put on events or do things that you would like to do.
Yeah.
So that's part of it too. I'm having fun while doing, your work in the community should be fun.
Yeah.
So for example, like Bike the Boulevard took place quarterly for 5 years.
Nice.
And that was, I feel, during a time where San Diego was very much, there was a lot of community around bike riding,
Yes.
And people really wanted to attend these community rides. And I do think they did open the doors for like realizing, how close we are to our communities and wanting to pop in on local breweries and stuff like that. Cajon Boulevard, I joke, because it's not an ideal place to bike.
Yeah.
Although we now have a bike lane.
Nice.
Yeah.
But that when you show them good locations, music venues, I mean, we would stop and play kickball,
Yeah.
that we'd have a good day and that would resonate.
Yeah.
So I'm never, and even doing community work, you're really propping up the cause. It's not about you, speaking in front of the microphone and saying what you're doing.
Yeah. That's freaking awesome.
Was it always called the Boulevard, or was that something that was presented with the huge, iconic sign that we now see when we go down there? That's one of the first things we saw when we moved to San Diego was the Boulevard.
It really
sign.
is a beautiful sign.
Yeah, it is a
Iconic.
really, really beautiful sign. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that gives me a lot of pride. Turning that corner on Park and seeing it all lit
You're
up.
like,
It's beautiful.
You're like, I did that.
No, I did not actually. So it was another thing that I mentioned this before, that I have. I liked working for an organization that had some sustainability behind it, and it had started, I think, in 1989.
Nice.
So maybe it was already around for like 20 years before I got going.
Yeah.
And they did make some big moves, and it was focused around, utilizing design and some urban planning tactics. So I was working with an organization that actually had a unique scope of work, unlike some of them that were very tailored towards, large-scale events a few times a year. So, one of the major projects that got this initiative off the ground, and I'll attack my former boss with this, it was almost like when the business associations were getting started, it came out of a community plan where I was like, all right, we need to support our local neighborhoods. And this is like during, white flight and very few local businesses in each community and boarded up windows. It's still like music venues in general. You don't really see inside, or those kind of dive bar qualities.
Mm-hmm.
So what came out of that was these organizations, business associations. All right, now we'll be like these semi connected to the city, but also our own nonprofit. And so that's how they organize. So it's like primarily just about the business corridor represented by the business owners. And it was going to be like each one micromanaging the group versus like the city thinking they can tackle, which they couldn't. So it was a good move. And so the Boulevard was one of the first organizations to get off the ground. And then they decided that they needed this big gateway sign. And so I understand that there was this discussion, what should it say? Should it say El Cajon Boulevard? Certainly not El Cajon. That was one pet peeve we all have, because we don't want to be associated with the city, 20 miles east.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought in this designer, Simon Andrews, who I'm still in touch with today. He's a sweet old man. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. But in any case, his firm did design it, and I think they were really feeling strong about the Boulevard, and they talked it over with the council member at the time, and maybe there was some confusion. Like, well, if you don't make this decision tonight, the money's going to go elsewhere, and so it did. And so it was installed, and that was that. And that was like almost, while it does have that retro appeal that feels like it could have been there for many more decades, it was sort of a statement that said more to come, And now, honestly, if you look at the west end of El Cajon Boulevard, where that sign is, and the Lafayette Hotel, it still holds its historic charm, but the new development and stuff like that is very welcomed, and the new businesses certainly too.
And around what year did it go up?
Probably 89, 90, something like that.
Oh,
wow.
beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And there's signs all throughout, San Diego with the neighborhoods and everything. Did they all go up around the same time, or was it all at different times,
Yeah, I think it probably set the trend. As I said, because there's a good network of, say, 15 business associations in San Diego, they all kind of mimic each other's work. Oh, somebody got a good sign. We need the good sign. Barrio Logan got their sign not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And also the direction of grants is there's definitely this low-hanging fruit of grants that exist anywhere. And it's like, all right, you got that CDBG grant for the sign? Cool. I'm going to go after it,
Yeah.
So they just know where the funding source is. They navigate it. I mean, some things take longer than others, but ultimately, those were the kind of the big moves in the early days, was that they got the sign, they got the landscape median, they put up these light poles, started, they say, public investment leads to private investment.
Wow, that's awesome.
And then the bid that you work for too, there was something like 800 businesses involved with it. More than 1,000.
You just read my mind.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah,
Go.
I was
You
like,
finish.
wow.
Go.
No, yeah. How did you? Because it's we've been doing walk the block and all that kind of stuff, and it's it's really difficult to kind of get people involved. So just reading that, I was like, that's freaking badass. How did that, how did you get, because I know you had even mentioned it's really hard to, know all of them, but it was, it's really awesome that you got to highlight a lot of these businesses. How did that go about? How did you, get all of these people, basically, involved in something?
Well, it would just it depended on what type of promotional direction we were taking, but it was really all about how we could include the businesses. And as I said, by interviewing them and building relationships with people over time, I kind of started dialing in on what approaches, what strategies would be best for marketing. And so, that led to, Bike the Boulevard definitely did span the whole district. Yeah. And we would include different businesses, but always hold on to some of the same ones as well. And then around 30th and El Cajon Boulevard, which became somewhat of a hot spot, sort of building off of how business was, booming in North Park. El Cajon Boulevard now had its own little hub called 30, we called it 30 ECB, and it was definitely filling out nicely. Just for example, it's always nice when like a large building gets separated into smaller spaces. I think you guys have that as an advantage here, that there's a lot of small spaces. It's an easy way to, get small businesses off the ground, so that this like larger piano store that went out of business was then subdivided into 4, and like the Media Arts Center already moved into that block, and then a coffee shop, and then followed this the home brewer, So all of a sudden this block really, they kind of moved in at the same time, and they became friendly together, and they, on their own started collaborating, and we just helped build on, what was already working. And then there was, talk about, I guess also me visiting other cities and getting inspired. I definitely seen more like, instead of the farmers market that is more about produce, but then also little of everything, like the food-based markets, So I thought, okay, we could move on that, and that was like well received by this new, so much higher design strip mall on Utah and Cajon Boulevard. So those new tenants really took to that idea. So we hosted that there, and that was the Boulevard Market, so that was somewhat of a 30 ECB thing. And then there's like, all right, but we got to move the energy east, let's not forget about City Heights, And, we had, as an organization, we're carrying out the work and the capacity for the Boulevard Market. But when this lot was vacant for a number of years, but the YMCA was just built on Fairmont, all right, I think there'd be interest, now that hub is building up, to go ahead and activate that lot and, see where that takes us, and also really do that in collaboration with other community groups. One, because we were kind of out of capacity, but also because I think we'd make a better name for it if we like asked the property owner together, and we worked on it together. And that was really our what we were supposed to be doing. So anyway, that is how Fair at 44 came about.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then I think we started shaping it as like most districts aren't just one long strip. And in fact, actually, we were 2 separate bids at one time, but we were asked to like join because one of the boards wasn't working out. So it is unusual that we did take on like 4 or 5 miles of a business district.
And it's also very uniquely multicultural and diverse. I mean, there's so much. So how you're dealing with different cultures, you're dealing with all that. How do you also kind of bring everyone together under one tent?
Well, that was like the hub strategy. So 30th and Cajon Boulevard, 30 ECB is a hub. The Lafayette Hotel is a hub. Now Fairmont's a hub. Actually, from early on, is something I really take a, personal interest in, was like how I navigated supporting the Little Saigon District.
Yeah.
And
because that wasn't always there, right? It wasn't always called. Was it always called the Little Saigon District, or how? What's the history behind that?
well, Vietnamese people moved here post the war.
Mm-hmm.
And they were probably an early example of people settling in City Heights because, one, it was fairly inexpensive, but also there was a lot of host nonprofits that helped people settle into the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why there was like a pretty large Vietnamese community in City Heights. And, with sort of limited choices, it's no wonder that they set up a lot of businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So actually it had been there for a very long time. So before I worked for the Boulevard, they actually had celebrated some like festival, New Year festivals. And then there was this group, it's kind of this transition from SDSU's Vietnamese, organization that kind of grew up and wanted to start a nonprofit and felt that this was the direction they wanted to take. So they brought it to our organization and said something, we want to start a Little Saigon District on Cajon Boulevard. Do you want to support this? We're absolutely.
Yeah.
So then, more or less, I always would have liked that a Vietnamese person sat in our office and was there to navigate, but I was the person. So that's something that it took on that scope of work and, helped them navigate different projects early on, such as banners and putting on events, and continued that all along. I mean, it led to a point where we actually got, the Commission for Arts and Culture, but a national arts grant to support like Saigon stories.
Wow.
I mean, it really is a very, moving story about the settlement of the Vietnamese community here. And I don't think, one, that people see that perspective when you talk about the Vietnam War, but actually that there are, millions of Vietnamese people living in the United States, and they're very happy that they have democracy and freedom.
Yeah.
And, to honor that and showcase that more contemporary, segment of diversity in San Diego.
Yeah. That's freaking awesome. I love that. You also had mentioned that in one of the articles that I read, because we kind of stalked you a little bit.
That's our research. Our research.
You did a great
We're
job.
like, wow. I'm like, Maddie should be a freaking a private investigator or something. Anytime I need help, can you look up this person? I can't find them. He's like, what is their first and last name?
It's called Google, babe. Come on.
I don't know how to do it. So I'm like, please.
Interwebs.
Yes.
He does a deep dive.
No, and you got it in order too.
Yeah. I was like, wow, okay. But it's I know that you had mentioned that one of the most fun things to do, being on the urban developing and all that kind of stuff, was the food. Tasting all the food. How was that? Because there's so many different cultures and all that kind of stuff. How was that getting to try all these different types of food?
I mean, still my favorite restaurants,
Yeah.
on Cajon Boulevard and
name drop.
And actually, it's really the grocery stores that I love more than anything.
Yeah.
Because it's tout what you like. That's it. And I guess that just came naturally. But also, I will say, early on, some writer in the Union Tribune described El Cajon Boulevard as the foodie Appalachian Trail. I'm like, that is, I don't know, I feel like I don't need to do my job. It's already in the headline, that we are the place for awesome, diverse food. So that just, again, became the strategy. You're seeing it, you're hearing it, let's tout food.
Yeah.
And that was something I wanted to do. So, we hosted, the Boulevard cooking class. One of my friends who loves food, she, did a little blog, so we went out with her and, Boulevard on a budget, I think was how it went. We did actually put together some food walking tours around Mexican food, around Vietnamese food. I think we did a vegan one. So it's just like I said, you're there for a long time. You continue to navigate fun opportunities on how to go about. Actually, just before COVID, this was going to be big. We were going to do... it was more about the launch of the 215 bus route and getting that pilot bus bike lane on El Cajon Boulevard, that we wanted to promote it through food. So we had some exchange going where we were actually going to get advertisements on the back of the buses and the bus benches to promote the Boulevard food tours, I think is what we were calling it. And that I had arranged all this where so for each the Vietnamese one or the beer one, we had some tour guide that was going to meet somebody on the West End, get on the bus. We were going to sell the tickets and take them up and down. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
That didn't pan out, unfortunately. People stopped going on buses.
Yeah.
And how did the pandemic affect the Boulevard?
We had just launched the Boulevard pilot bus bike lane. There actually just 2 weeks before, there was a lot of momentum because we just hosted this developers tour. There was a lot of collaboration around Fair at 44, around Little Saigon, more or less all came to a halt, So we had a lot of programs going, and ultimately, I guess I started hearing that some of the bids were almost folding. I don't know, because they didn't have their events or something like that. And maybe the city was actually going to take our money, which was really, really bad choice. It's that our underlying mission is to support the businesses. While, that would take away more or less a lot of my event programming and economic development program, that's all right, because this is when they need us the most,
100%.
honestly.
Exactly.
And that's kind of where I go back to, do places, the affluent neighborhoods really need bids, But yeah, right? It was just obvious that we needed to navigate and be that supportive role to the small businesses. And that was our main charge. So whether, there's so many grants coming out, always being a source of information for that. I'd go out of my way to text, call, everything to make sure these businesses were getting their grants. And then we actually set up collaboratively a local source of funding. So we just needed to be there for the businesses at the time. We also, because we had these like outdoor lots, one fun thing that we took on was giving out food. And then we more or less realized, we could be a resource to a lot more because there's a lot of need, you know? There was like a diaper drive. Then there became a food drive that was going strong for like at least a year and a half, serving 150 people, you know, line outside a fair at 44. And this fruit swap thing and receiving free food from people in the community who have, you know, fruit falling off their trees. And so just, and then, the social media and just responding and sharing the needs of the businesses. And I think people were really receptive at the time to wanting to support local. So you better put it in front of their face what they should be supporting, you know? And so during that time, even though I would say, you know, I was starting to think about navigating, I realized like, no. And you know, honestly, I was about to go to Oaxaca and I was thinking, well, I could just go and stay there for a couple months. Like, no, the time is now. We're here for the businesses. That's who I support.
100%.
Dude, that's awesome. That's beautiful because it's like I do feel that a lot of the businesses really needed that support. So it's like you just being that type of person that was like calling and being like, you should freaking like get this grant. You should do this. You should do that. Like I remember during a time for us here, it's like we didn't have that, you know. So it was like really difficult to kind of like as a small business owner kind of like going through that. And like I remember there would be like nights where I would like cry and be like, I'm going to lose my business over something I didn't even have like control over. And, you know, that like anxiety of like, where are these people that are supposed to like help us, you know, and where like, or someone that you trust that can like bring like some kind of information to where you could feel comfortable enough and being like, hey, like, what do I need and how could I, and there's like no judgments and like, well, your business sucks or whatever, you know. And
where was our Beryl in here?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, it was kind of like very scary at that time. And, you know, the good thing is that like finally the Logan Heights CDC started coming through and they were like knocking on every door and then just being like, if you need help, like, we will, like, help you do it. And, like, you know, and them just kind of, like, coming out and doing all that kind of stuff, like, really, like, created a relationship where it's, like, we started, like, this whole, like, trust thing. So it's, like, I feel like you were definitely, like, an angel in that, you know, because it's, like, I know that as, like, a small business, like, we were all kind of like, oh, shit, like, what's going to happen? And, like, we've invested so much time and energy in, like, business and, like, business isn't like one of those things where you're like, we're banking, we're millionaires, you know. It's like
exactly.
It's like a
1
passion.
or 2 months and that's it.
It's like a passion project, or you know, you just love it so much, and you know, and it felt really scary. So it's like you being like that person is like very admirable to, like, you know, just to be sitting here with you, because it's like you don't see a lot of people like that. You don't meet a lot of people that are willing to go that extra mile, you know. So yeah.
Well, I had the position, you know.
Yeah.
Not like I wasn't being paid for it, but ultimately I knew what my role was, and I just had I had something to do, you know. And now I'm working from home, you know, and it's like, do something with your, you know, position at hand, just like I always have, but in a new way, you know.
Yeah.
But I will say that's actually when I got to know you and saw that Union Tribune article of you sewing face masks, and I think that led to us probably also realizing, all right, you know, the desire is there to produce a lot of masks and work with the community. And we did, I don't know if you caught this, but we hosted like a face mask fashion show.
Shut up! That's so cool!
And that was another showcase of diversity, like working with IRC, who has, you know, remember like East African clients and diverse clients in general, but working with like a lot of clothing designers and them, I mean, like matching. I was all about the matching outfits plus the masks.
Yes.
Great idea.
So we had like a catwalk for that twice.
That is so cool. I love that. Well, you know what? It was so crazy because it's like the way that I like basically started kind of like noticing like you was, a lot of people were like, oh my God, bread. And I was like, what? And like, I love, who doesn't love bread, you know? And
Here
so
we are.
exactly. So I was like, wait, bread? And then like someone had like showed like this beautiful like piece of bread and like, you know, like all the little like sides that you do. And I was like, fuck. And like it was like during that time where everyone's like, support your makers, support your small businesses, and you're like, oh my god, this person is like, and so someone had tagged you, and I was like, that looks like fucking bomb ass bread, and like, you know, and everyone was like you gotta support this, you know, and so I was like, I have to follow this person, you know, so I started following.
There was that awesome surge also, you know, and I feel like not just like my bread, but like in general, like it was always a good idea to support small business. Always a good idea to have outdoor seating and parklets, you know. And finally, it came much like a greater need for it.
Exactly, yeah. So I started noticing you, and I was like, damn. How do you bake bread? You know, because like, I can't fucking bake shit. Like, you know, and I feel like that's like definitely like a science, and it's like,
yeah, you're right.
For me, I'm like, it's a skill, you know, and so for me, I'm like, I've done like banana nut bread, and I'm like, and I felt like I was like, wow, I'm doing really good with this, and then I totally burned all of them, and I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna stick to my sewing. But how did this whole bread thing like start to happen, like?
Well, I hadn't been baking bread for actually a very long time.
Yeah. How often do you do it?
Prior to selling it, I was baking like every other Sunday, 2 loaves.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So something I picked up a bread book a long time ago, actually, when I first moved to San Diego. And bread, I guess, always spoke to me. I like enjoying good bread, you know. And while I like to cook, but I more lean toward just like coming up with a dinner plan. I'm not really invested in like, you know, dishes that take a while to bake. I just thought, all right, you know, I wouldn't mind trying this out. And it was funny. I picked up the book. I immediately went to Sprouts at the time. Oh, Henry's, I mean.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was about to buy the ingredients for olive bread because that's my favorite bread. And I saw something of a starter. I'm like, I knew enough to be like, why doesn't this recipe have yeast? And so I looked to the front of the book where it's like, well, this is how you go about making bread. You have to get your starter going, and then So anyway, all right, that's really where like it clicked with me, science too. Something I've like really have not invested my mind towards, but like I made this starter, which really is about like collecting molecules from the air, and it's a natural form of how bread rises. And so, you know, it worked. I baked the bread. It was actually really good. I was surprised because most people are like, what kind of oven do you use, you know? But a normal homemade, you know, house oven will work. It's more about the process and the, you know, quality of the ingredients that you put into it. And I guess once I made it and it was great, I didn't want to either disrespect the starter that I developed. So it just got me into this nice routine. And, you know, I would host like brunches pretty regularly with my homemade bread on Sundays. And I loved gifting it. And my parents expected me, you know, to fly home with it. So over the years, people would say, oh, you really should sell it, you know. But it didn't have a job, you know. And it didn't occur to me that like I could scale it because, you know, when you buy a little bag, the prices just don't work. So anyway, it was just during, the pandemic and working from home. And I think all of us are being very like more aware that our food resources, you know, could be scarce. Mm-hmm. So you better take what you can get. And so I was kind of like jokingly bartering my bread, and people were taking to that. And then I guess maybe if a friend or something like that actually bought me a bag of flour from Restaurant Depot. And so that kind of showed me the scale that I could move towards. And I didn't mind baking more than once every other week, you know? I was home, so why not? And, it just like there was that surge of interest early on through COVID that people were buying my bread. And it was fun. I would actually bring it to our fruit swap on Wednesdays at Fair at 44, so the exchange would happen outdoors. And then it's like, while most people like went into this isolation and not talking to people, here I am. I've got bread customers, you know. It was a joy to like be there for people when they felt that they needed, you know, that resource, and also to have the social time with people. And so I just didn't want to let go of that. And I saw how things were going. So ultimately, you know, it's like, when business is going well, you look to expand it. So that's where I brought in a couple of other sides. And I've always said that good bread deserves good olive oil. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I had only maybe in the last few years discovered that like all of California and Baja produces extremely good olive oil. So I wanted to bring that into the fold as a way of like, you know, educating people not only on like what quality, you know, slow rise bread tastes like, but also that we have very good regional olive oil. And then that became like a key component of everything that, you know, like my homemade chimichurri, you know, pop-ups, everything in the first year was like really fun and easy. Then I more had to take on like some more strategy around it to keep it going. But I've definitely found that Cafe Moto once a month.
Nice.
Yes.
And like keeping things super local, and it's like where I know people is just working out. My husband actually worked at Cafe Moto for a number of years, so that's why I'm like
Super
well
cool.
received there.
Cool.
And at the same time, you know, I've been in San Diego a long time. I know a lot of nonprofits, and I've had a good relationship with Via Internacional, who is the first tenant of Bread and Salt when they reopened. And I know that they've always had an interest in opening a bakery with the owners.
Yes.
So, yeah, Elisa and I reconnected. She's the director of Via, and I think I popped up at Bread and Salt a few times with El Cajon, and I think I just joked to the owners one day. I'm like, because I sell the starter. I'm like, this starter could quite literally start your bakery, you know? And then it was kind of like a personal thing. Like, I'm not going to really, like, I don't want to be a restaurateur. But also my olive bread alone is not, you know, enough to support, like, the word of bakery. And it'd be nice to link up with other bakers and have a more full menu. And it's like I saw the opportunity and sort of blessing that comes with working at home and the money coming through. And I'm like, this is a good business, you know, platform for others. You know, if they haven't moved in that direction, it could be something that's very supportive. So that's where I was like, yeah, a bunch of home-based bakers then showcasing their goods together is sort of what I had in mind. And then also, yeah, just like my feelings of collaboration have always been there. So Via was very receptive to the idea. They were in the Union Tribune a few years ago, or maybe 5 or so years ago, touting that they were going to open this bakery with the owners of Bread and Salt, and it was going to be called Pan y Sal. And that just didn't take off. The investors didn't come through. So, and I knew those people, so the interest was always there. Like, I sell bread, I sell salt, I want to be part of this group. And she said, like when they were doing some research, one of their interns actually recommended, why don't you just start selling some bread in the community? Like, you don't need to build out a full bakery first, you know? See where the direction of the business goes just by keeping it easy. So I was like, building on that, why don't we bring a couple of bakers together and just do some pop-ups?
Yeah.
And she gave me the okay, and like this, you know, the owners of Bread and Salt were receptive of it. And then when I connected with Carmen from Mujeres, she's like, absolutely, I'd love to host you here. And it's at Bread and Salt, you know?
Beautiful.
So, all right, I made some phone calls. I never even knew, I hadn't connected with Amanda from Pan del Barrio, but I knew she was here. I'm like, well, she needs to be part of this, or else I can't even like feel like I could move forward. Yeah. And then other group pointed out this like nonprofit called Bread Encounters. So we had a little collective.
Nice.
And then I hopped over to this, if you know, Olivewood in National City. They've been training like kitchenistas and offer health programming for maybe 20 years or so.
Super cool.
Anyway, so I went there and sold my bread and connected with a couple of other people that fit into their bakers. And so now our collective is like 6 or so bakers.
Nice.
We did do 4 pop-ups at the end of the year at Mujeres. You know, more or less they did go well. We felt, we were kind of like scared about keeping that going in January. It's cold, you know, it was evening time. Yeah. We just thought like, all right, we did pull it off. Now we know each other. Let's start like planning our future, you know, actually developing a mission statement and what our vision is. Because like I held the vision and I heard from other people that they had this shared vision, but no, I want to like make it firm, you know, and Via was behind that. And then funding actually came through to support like promotion and branding and some equipment that hopefully we'll nail down very quickly, but we might get like this trailer that has our brand on it and do more pop-ups. So anyway, like those kind of quick steps, like getting money that really supports this vision and, you know, people realizing this could be a real thing. Everybody was I feel interested in the idea because it was Bread and Salt.
Yes.
And because we had this backing of a nonprofit that was bringing in money, you know? So things are like moving kind of swiftly. We have a solid group. We did agree on Panipas Collective,
Beautiful.
which I'm really proud of the name. And I don't know, there's a good chance we could get funding for the commercial kitchen, which if that happens, like,
That's
it's
awesome.
on.
And what is
That
the
is
grand
awesome.
vision moving forward if you do secure funding?
That we would be like a collective, maybe legal cooperative of bakers that establish a spot in bread and salt.
Beautiful.
And then we do have this nonprofit, actually 2 behind us. So we have somewhat mission-driven programming ideas, education. Actually, I'm really loving this one where we would expand sort of like it's called the Border Church. It happens every Sunday at the border, maybe breaking bread at the border. So these are like offshoot programs that we could get
So
funding
cool.
for as
Beautiful.
well. But more or less, yeah, being a stable bakery in Barrio Lugan.
Awesome.
That's freaking awesome, dude. I'm freaking proud of you guys. Look at you
I
guys.
know,
I'm
I
like,
talk about things and I'm like, and there could be a bakery.
I'm like, dude, I need to fucking step up my fucking game. I'm like, dude, I'm like, you're doing a lot of stuff. I'm like, do you sleep?
I sleep a lot.
You're like
The
very
other
comfortably.
day, yes, exactly. 10 o'clock.
Dude, that's freaking really freaking cool. Like, I know Manny had kind of like mentioned something like that. And so like seeing like the whole list of like all these things that you do, I was like, damn, like she is the most interesting person. You
are.
know, like you are very, you do a lot of like awesome things, and you know, just like your whole presence and energy is like really awesome too. So just looking at that list and then him telling me that, I was like, oh shit, like that is so amazing, you know, to like get people together. And it's like, I've always kind of like had like that similar style of like, you know, connecting with people. And I love like, oh, you're really good at this and you guys would be awesome. Like, you know, just talking together and having like the same kind of vision and stuff. So it's like, it's really cool to like have like a role model that like has been doing it and is doing it, and just kind of being like, can I have some tips?
No, I believe it definitely takes one to know one, and San Diego is
Yeah.
a strong, you know, eclectic, creative community.
Yeah, for sure. Has there been anything that you're kind of like, this has been one thing that does help me? You know, like any kind of advice for like community building, or, you know, just getting people to work together? Do you have any kind of advice for that? Because I could take some.
I lean on that early step of community organizing and having those one-on-ones as a foundation.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, personally, you know, as I said, I'm not working with the Boulevard anymore. I'm consulting, and I think I've just learned that I like juggling different things and not sort of being boxed into like one group. You know, even though I did a lot of different things for the Boulevard, it was still just all about the Boulevard,
Yeah.
you know? I think that, once you put your time and, you know, build relationships into sort of one thing, it's a good offspring to take on more, you know, and be independent.
Yeah, that's freaking awesome. I love that. Yeah.
And enjoy community. You know, as I said, like early on, I connected with Golden Hill. It was a quick connection to get to know the baristas. I guess it wasn't too, you know, I joked that when I moved from my apartment on 26 in Broadway, I couldn't move more than 4 blocks. I just loved this liquor store owner, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to always be close to him, something like that. But no, I like Golden Hill a lot. And then, just the charm of, like, getting, you know, our neighborhoods are great and they're thriving, but it's the personal connection, you know, and I feel there is a great story and relationship to be had with all, you know, so many business owners. So I definitely thrived by, you know, feeling connected and building on that sort of trusting relationship with business owners. And I guess I just have a knack for that. So that's why I connect with communities, you know, throughout San Diego. I also really am passionate about going across the border and seeing like the larger picture of our binational region, and you know, almost like push myself to go down there. Not to say a push, I have many reasons now, but I still always want to stay connected and visit some of the, you know, I have a handful of friends, but like I really want to nurture those because, you know, I want to have that relationship with Baja as well.
Nice.
I have a random question to kind of end it on, but because I saw you on the bike here, and I know you're passionate about bikes, so I just want to know, because I'm not very well informed about advisory bike lanes. Is it a good thing, or
advisory bike lanes?
Well, or just I guess there was just recently on the news there was they were installing them in like Mira Mesa and all around town where the bike, you know, they were installing new bike lanes. So is it a good thing, or is it?
I just question that because I think I just call them bike lanes.
That's why I asked, because we only know from what's on the news and everything like that, and they were kind of, portraying it as, oh my goodness, this was gonna make the traffic so this and that, but we thought it was a good thing. So it was like, what's the real story with it?
Okay, the real story.
What's the real story? Uncut.
Yeah, exactly. I think allowing people to bike safely is a very good story. I don't think that should be questioned, But it's unfortunate that it's a little bit of a battle because Southern California and Tijuana and most of the country was really developed around the automobile. But if you go to cities, outside of our country, but even like New Orleans, the cities that are like 200-300 years old, those streets are much more narrow. So we've just been accustomed to these very wide streets, and unfortunately, it doesn't come with like seeing many people on bicycles or people walking around their neighborhood. I have felt like I need to lead by example, honestly, because one, it makes me feel better, but also I think San Diego would feel better if more people were, taking it into their own hands to really live more locally by walking and biking. And but I know there's a fear factor because, with very wide streets and not very walkable destinations or shade, that people don't really, see that opportunity at hand. I don't always lean on the bike lane to be like the number one answer to everything, and I realize that being part of like a bicycle advocacy world, and I actually do now serve on the Bicycle Coalition. Oh, nice. That it's not like every street needs a bicycle lane, I think every wide street it could work in narrowing the street. That's one way of approaching making it a safer street. But I kind of learned this through Cajon Boulevard. We got this funding to take on like funding around a complete street, and really one of my main drives on working with the boulevard is that it was a 6-lane road. Practically a 10-lane road if you include like the turning lanes and the parking lanes, and that's something needed to be done about that, And also then it occurred to me that there's this thing called Vision Zero that looks at like every city and where the most deadly, dangerous streets are, and Cajon Boulevard was number 2 next to University Avenue. Wow. I was also I was lightly struck by a car. It, nothing fatal, obviously, but I witnessed it. I know if it occurred to me, it's occurring to a lot of people. And then this data report comes out about how many collisions and how many deaths. And then I plug into a Google, search where now I'm getting emails nearly every other week where someone was almost killed or, So I just know it to be so true that I became like, all right, something needs to happen. So any sort of grant funding or, where we could advocate for narrowing the street, I was there to help lead. And while there was so much pushback when we were talking about Little Saigon getting a bike lane, just initially, that it's almost like this grant funding and working with consultants went nowhere. And then after this grant came, MTS, the bus company, they're like, why didn't you ever consider that we're about to invest in this bus rapid transit, and build new bus stops and bring in new, unfortunately they weren't bringing the dedicated bus lane at the time. But anyway, they were making a big investment on Cajon Boulevard because it's so much of a central, corridor that it was taking people from downtown all the way to SDSU. That's like, all right, look at where every neighborhood really, where is like the priority outside of the automobile. I would say in San Ysidro, it's walking. People walk across the border, they do their shopping, invest in like making the sidewalks wider or more places to sit, and then everybody will benefit, but at least move towards one of those directions to make it, more comfortable outside of just driving. Yeah. So that's where I have navigated. So Cajon Boulevard, the priority was the bus, and then we did advocate, all right, you've invested in the bus rapid transit, but you didn't give us a dedicated bus lane. And now there was more interest. And by the way, can you make it a bus bike lane? Because where else are the bikes going to go otherwise? And we navigated that, and we got both,
Nice.
So ultimately, I think do some, observational work, community engagement. I actually just did some community engagement in Imperial Beach around a bike lane project, and they actually had already finished Imperial Beach Boulevard, narrowed the street, enhanced the landscaping, created more crosswalks, did give it a green lane. And people took to it, Of course, they would. It's a flat community, but has a, right on the beach. Yeah. So like that, is a perfect project that also, as we talked about, this next leg of a bike lane that I could build on the conversation, and most people were in favor of it, So, I don't really like to necessarily see the conflict that arises from this. I'd really, as an urban planner, be in the direction of what the community wants. So that supports, like really investing some time in the needs of the community, hearing back from them. But in some cases, you really just need to be a leader and be like, our goals are to bring down pollution, to make our streets safer, and this is what we're going to do.
And stand behind it,
I did, I've watched New York City set a goal of 50 miles of bike lanes per year and meet that. I don't like how San Diego just lingers. No. So when you put like a little leg of a bike lane and it doesn't connect anywhere, where are we going with that? Nobody
100%.
sees the ultimate vision. But if there was a good route that gets you around all the old local neighborhoods through Balboa Park, blah, 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 we'd really have something substantial to stand behind.
Beautiful.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that.
Thank you for answering that.
Yeah.
A little curveball.
I love that. And you know what? It's so crazy because we used to be in Bankers Hill, and all of a sudden they did that whole like bike lane that goes all the way to Hillcrest. And we were at the marketplace, and I was like, and it was like around like maybe 4 or 5 o'clock, and you're seeing everyone like, riding their bike back up. And I was like, that is the fucking coolest thing, like having like a designated like bike lane where it's like everyone's basically like, I'm sure like during like the morning hours they're utilizing like, because that was 5th Ave, so they're utilizing 4th Ave to go down to like downtown and then back up to. So I just thought that was like the coolest thing, because it's like, you're right, like if there's a bike lane but it doesn't connect anywhere, then it's like, okay, so you're just riding this lane here. But it's like the whole thing of like actually being able to connect from one city to another and being able to go somewhere is awesome, and I feel like that would encourage more people to like get on a bike and go somewhere. Because it's like, I haven't rode a bike.
Well, every time your brother visits us, he starts at the harbor and he goes all the way down to the South Bay. I guess there's just a lane that.
I was just on that. It's
beautiful.
Yeah, it takes you from basically right here, where the trolley is in Barrio Logan. You can get an awesome path that takes you around the estuary and then up to Coronado.
Yeah.
There are some good paths. Like with the hill, I think the e-bike, that phenomenon is growing to make it even easier. And it's like the advocates around bicycling and urban planning in general have been pushing on this vision for a very long time. And like finally we're seeing, overall a good network, but there needs to be some gaps closed. You have the Hillcrest route, you have J Street is great, but it doesn't reach up to Barrio Logan to connect to 30th Street, so that's where I would like to push on things like just fill some gaps.
Fill the gaps.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you,
for
Beryl.
coming, bringing awesome bread.
Yes, breaking bread.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
I'm
And
so
just
happy
getting
to
to
be
know
here.
you.
Yeah.
The most interesting woman in the world.
In the world. I can see the commercial.
Yeah. You're like holding a beer or some bread or some olive oil. Or we could market this differently. But you're awesome.
Yes.
And like, it was just like such an interesting conversation to have with you. And
Thank
just
you.
like getting to know you even like before, like having like that, like behind the scenes conversation is awesome. So
I want to point out that it was very much directed at you guys because
yeah.
I really do admire how much leadership you've taken up in supporting this community. Of course, your business, stands amongst all, but not to say amongst all, but it really is a beautiful example of local business and all that you're doing. But the fact that you do see the larger opportunity to unite your community and all that's come from Logan Avenue and the events, and honestly through COVID, it was a fun place to hang out, there was life here, and and the music and just like really you could see just in terms of me acknowledging where good things are happening in business districts. This is, unto itself really more grassroots and working out in a very positive way.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Beryl. Thank you.
It's like Ninja Turtles. Yeah.
Cowabunga.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Claudia! Claudia! Claudia!
What? I'm listening to the Voice of San Diego podcast, and it's getting really good.
New episodes every Friday.